You'll belong to the darkness, just like the rest. That's what Silas Cain screamed before the cave exploded in fire and smoke. But long before the flames, a cowboy named Cole Brennan rode into a valley wrapped in silence, fear, and an old Apache curse. They said no man ever made it out. They were almost right. This is the story of the man who came anyway. True Wild West Stories invites you to listen. Dust rose in thick curls behind the restless herd, turning the dying light into something almost solid. Cole Brennan leaned into the saddle, one hand firm on the reins, the other steady on the horn. His horse snorted beneath him, just as tense. The lead steer, a brindled brute with mean eyes, kicked at the dust and spooked the others into a slow sideways drift. It wasn't the kind of evening that let a man relax. The sky burned orange and gold behind the ridges, casting long shadows across the open plain. Wind stirred the sagebrush in bursts, and somewhere out there coyotes had already started their talking. Cole kept one eye on the cattle and the other on the sinking sun. Dustwood wasn't far, just a half-day's ride if the herd behaved, which they didn't. Still, it was close enough to smell coffee and cooked beans if the wind turned right. Cole had come down this road too many times to count, but tonight it felt different. He shifted in the saddle, spine aching from a week's worth of sleeping on the ground, and let his mind drift. Not far, just enough to remember. The wind carried thoughts of nights in stranger towns, fights in colder barns, and the time he spent looking for a name that didn't burn when people said it. He had no family left, and maybe no future worth chasing, but a steady horse and a clean rifle gave a man something like purpose. The herd bellowed again, and he pulled himself back to the moment. Jed Sawyer rode up beside him, grinning like a jackal. "Reckon they'll bolt again?" Jed asked, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice was always too loud. "They always bolt if you talk too much," Cole replied, deadpan. Jed laughed. "You need whiskey in your blood, Brennan. Loosens the spine." Cole didn't answer. The red dirt trail curved toward town, and ahead, the lights from Ruth Holloway's saloon flickered like a welcome fire. They led the herd into the pens by the watering troughs and tied off the horses. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with smoke, cheap perfume, and the clink of glasses. Ruth moved behind the bar with the grace of someone who'd once danced for applause and now just wanted peace. She slid a bowl of bean stew toward Cole, steam rising slow like it knew the air was tired. "I heard someone saw dust over the Red Rock Valley," she said casually. Jed scoffed. "That again? That place is just a bunch of old ghost tales and coyote dens." Ruth didn't look at him. Her eyes were on Cole. "Every few years someone tries to cut through it. Shortcut to nowhere. They don't come back. Maybe they found something better," Jed offered, smirking. Ruth laid down a slab of cornbread beside Cole's bowl. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Cole stirred the beans with his spoon. "You ever see it?" "My father did," she said, quiet. Said the air went thin and the trees bent wrong. Said it felt like God turned his back on that place. Jed rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He was too busy calculating. Cole could see it, the flicker in his eyes, the way his lips worked without sound, like he was counting something no one else could see. The screen door slammed. Dust and dusk poured in as the younger cowhands returned from the pens, hollering and laughing. Then came the scream of a steer. One, then many. Outside, Cole dropped the spoon, chair scraping loud against the floor as he moved. In 3 strides, he was back in the saddle, Jed not far behind. The herd was panicking, a swirl of hooves and horns. Something had spooked them. Deep. More than coyotes, more than wind. Cole's gelding lunged forward as he snapped the reins, aiming to head off the leaders. But the dirt road he'd known all his life wasn't there anymore. Ahead, the land had split. A jagged cleft opened between the bluffs, swallowing the trail in a crack of stone and shadow. Cole pulled hard on the reins, heart hammering. The sky burned red above, the kind of red that warned men to stay put, and he was already too far in. Cole's horse reared as the earth gave way beneath them. There was no time to think. Only the sudden jolt of gravity yanking the world sideways. His fingers lost the reins, and his boots lifted from the stirrups as the gelding screamed, a raw animal sound, and the two of them tumbled into the deep, splitting shadows below. The fall wasn't long, but it was rough. Cole landed hard on his side, dirt and stones biting into his ribs. He rolled with the momentum, the world spinning in smears of red sky and sharp rock. Pain bloomed in his shoulder, his breath catching tight in his chest. The bay lay a few yards off, legs tangled, sides heaving, but alive. For a moment, all he could hear was the wind, whistling between the rocks like it had a memory to share. Then Ruth's voice came back to him, not in sound, but in warning. "They don't come back from there, Cole." He sat up, coughing, wiping blood from his lip with the back of his hand. The trail behind him was gone, swallowed by the rocks. Before him, the canyon stretched into a narrow throat, lined with walls the color of dried blood. The light here was strange, muted, though the sun hadn't yet set. Cole stood, staggered, and glanced at the gelding. The horse limped to its feet, one leg favoring, but it would hold. They were together, at least. A shallow stream ran through the valley floor, its water clear but slow, winding past thorny brush and leaning willows. He led the horse to drink, rubbing its neck gently, whispering low comfort. That's when he saw her. Across the stream, standing barefoot on a flat rock, was a woman, tall, still, her black braid falling over one shoulder. Her dress was worn buckskin and beads hung from her belt like small stars. She looked young, but her eyes carried centuries. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice carried by the wind, though her lips barely moved. Cole froze. "You saw what happened?" "We fell in. The valley decides who falls," she said, gaze unblinking. "It lets no one leave without a cost." He squinted. "What's your name?" "Nayeli." "You live here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, the wind lifting the dust in tight little spirals around her ankles. "This place is cursed," she said. "Long ago it was sacred. Now it is something else. The spirits here—" "Hold on," Cole cut in, raising a hand. "You trying to scare me off? Is that it?" "I don't need to scare you," she said, calm as stone. "The valley does that well enough on its own." Cole looked around. The walls of the canyon towered above them, jagged and red, the shapes carved by centuries of wind and sorrow. A chill ran through him despite the warm air. The hairs on his arms stood up as if touched by something unseen. "I don't believe in curses," he muttered, half to himself. "You will," Nayeli said softly. Suddenly a long, low howl echoed off the rocks. It wasn't a coyote. It was deeper, older, less animal, more wound. It rippled through the valley like a warning, folding into itself as it bounced between the cliffs. Cole stepped back instinctively, hand dropping to the revolver at his hip. The gelding pawed nervously at the ground, ears flat. What the hell was that? Nayeli didn't move. One of them. One of what? But she said nothing more. His people. Cole followed it and saw them. Footprints. Not his, not Nayeli's. Fresh, bare, human, but twisted somehow. The toes were longer than they should have been, the arches deeper, like they belonged to someone running on all fours. The ground was still damp, and the prints sank deep. The wind picked up again, and with it came a swirl of red dust rising in a spiral beside him. Tight, fast, almost dancing. Cole stared as it lifted, twirling once like a warning flag, then broke apart. He swallowed hard. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just rock and silence. It watched. And now it knew he was here. The fire crackled in a wide circle at the center of the camp, sending sparks leaping into the night like tiny spirits. Children danced around the flames, bare feet thumping to the rhythm of a single hand drum that beat with steady urgency. Shadows swayed across the tents, alive and flickering. The moon overhead hung low and silver, its light catching on the beadwork and feathers of the gathered Apache. Cole stood at the edge of it all, his hat low, back stiff. He wasn't used to being looked at like this, not with open suspicion, not with quiet mourning. And yet no one said a word to him. They let him stay because of Nayeli. Only her presence kept the stares from turning into something sharper. The smell of burning pine and roasted corn filled the air, heady and nostalgic. Cole closed his eyes for a second. Somewhere deep in his childhood, he remembered a night not unlike this. Different people, different place, but the same firelight casting stories into the dark. His uncle had once told ghost tales beside a cattle branding fire, and even back then, Cole had laughed too loud to hide the fear rising in his throat. Nayeli sat beside him, quiet, watching the dancers. They danced to call the old ones, she said. To keep them close, or keep them away. Which one is it tonight? He asked. Her eyes didn't move from the fire. We'll know soon. An older man stepped forward, his face lined like old bark, long braids streaked with gray. He held a carved staff, its head adorned with crow's feathers and tiny bones that clicked in the breeze. Amos Redbird. He raised his hand and the drum stopped. The silence was thick, expectant. Long ago, Amos began, voice deep and dry like the desert wind. This valley was protected. Spirits walked these cliffs, not as enemies, but as brothers. Then came the strangers. He paused, eyes flicking to Cole. They cut into the stone, took what wasn't theirs. The spirits turned. The earth grew angry. Now, any outsider who dares to enter must offer blood. The words landed hard, though no one flinched. Cole shifted his boots, feeling the weight of every gaze. I didn't come looking for spirits, he said. But they found you, Amos replied, as if the point was already made. Nayeli passed Cole a simple wooden bowl. In it was a coarse, steamed cornmeal flatbread. Dense, warm, slightly burnt at the edges. Alongside it, a gourd filled with a cloudy liquid. Fermented maize. It smelled sweet but sharp. Cole took a cautious bite of the bread. The flavor was earthy, gritty, and oddly comforting. He swallowed the drink. It burned faintly going down, awakening memories of cheap whiskey and old times. The dancers had resumed, slower now, arms raised. Someone began to hum, low and rhythmic. The air shifted. Suddenly, commotion broke near the outer tents. Two men came running, one dragging something heavy wrapped in a blanket. The dancing stopped. The blanket dropped. The shape that rolled out was unmistakable. A man, white-skinned, a cowboy by the look of his torn boots and dust-covered duster. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. His face frozen in a grimace of horror, like he'd seen something no man should and died trying to scream. A hush fell over the fire circle. One of the elders leaned down and whispered in Amos's ear. Another one tried to find the gold, Amos said aloud. The valley swallowed him. Cole's gut twisted. He didn't know the man, but he knew the look in his eyes. He stepped back, hand slowly tightening around the grip of his revolver. The leather was warm beneath his fingers, but the chill in his spine wouldn't ease. The flames danced higher. The shadows grew bolder. And somewhere beyond the circle of light, something was still watching. The wind howled through the canyon like it carried 1,000 voices. Cold fingers of air brushed along the cliff face, moaning through narrow crevices. Above, the moon hung pale and bruised, its light washed in a sickly red that barely pierced the night. Cole sat upright on the blanket of hides they'd laid for him, eyes wide open, sleep nowhere near. Amos's words wouldn't leave his head. The valley decides who falls, who bleeds. He rubbed his jaw, the stubble scratching beneath his palm. Across the fire pit, the camp was silent, tents dark, fires smoldering low. Only the distant trickle of the stream broke the silence, a soft, eerie lullaby in a place that never seemed to rest. Something was off. He stood quietly, boots crunching faintly on gravel as he walked. The night pressed down heavy, as if the air itself didn't want to be disturbed. The wind shifted again, and with it something else. A scuff, faint, like a foot sliding over stone. Cole froze. Ahead, in the faint glow of moonlight, a shadow moved, not big, graceful, slipping past a line of crooked trees like a ghost. He recognized the long braid before he recognized the form. Nayeli. She was walking alone, away from the camp, toward the northern edge of the valley, where the cliffs jutted like broken teeth. Cole followed, careful with every step. He kept far enough to avoid the cracking branches, close enough not to lose her. She moved with purpose. They came to a spot where the stream narrowed and veered around a fallen tree. There, half hidden behind undergrowth and thorn bush, stood a massive red boulder. Cole watched from behind a twisted cottonwood as Nayeli pressed her hands against its side. Slowly, a portion of the rock shifted. Not much, but enough. A thin seam of darkness opened between the stones. A hidden passage. Nayeli slipped inside without a sound, vanishing into the rock like it had swallowed her whole. Cole's breath hitched. He waited. 1 minute, then another. Still, nothing but the rustle of leaves and the gentle gurgle of the water nearby. He stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel, now louder than he liked. He approached the boulder, hands grazing its rough edge. The passage was still open, just a sliver, but enough for a man to squeeze through. Then he heard it. Metal on stone. A faint clink. Then a dragging sound. Then silence. He strained to listen. Another clink, like something heavy being dragged across a cavern floor. His hand reached slowly for the revolver at his hip. He didn't know if it was ghosts, beasts, or something far worse that lived down there. But he wasn't going in unarmed. As he moved closer to peer into the darkness, a sound behind him made every hair on his neck rise. A bootstep. Close. He spun, gun half raised, heart leaping, and froze. There, not 3 feet behind him, stood a figure cloaked in shadow. No torch, no sound, just watching. The moonlight broke through the trees for a second and caught the edge of a knife in the figure's hand. The figure behind Cole stepped forward, boots crunching softly against the gravel slope. The faint moonlight spilled over the stranger's shoulders, revealing a weathered coat, threadbare at the sleeves, and a battered wide-brim hat drooping slightly on one side. Cole tensed, his revolver still half raised. "Easy, son," the man said, voice low and calm. "I'd rather not meet the Lord tonight." The barrel dropped an inch. "You snuck up on me," Cole muttered, still wary. The man offered a tired smile. "Didn't mean to. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes with quiet steps." Cole stepped back, giving the stranger a full once-over. He looked like he'd walked through dust and fire, boots cracked, shirt faded, collar stained with time. Around his neck hung a simple wooden cross, worn smooth by years of touch. "Name's Caleb Morris," the man said, extending a calloused hand. "Some call me Reverend. Others just call me Fool." Cole hesitated a beat before shaking it. "I've heard of you," he said. "You preach out near the canyon towns. Wooden chapel with no roof?" Caleb chuckled. "Still missing half the pews, too. The sermons are mostly to coyotes these days." The two stood in silence for a moment, the wind rising again. The smell of old ashes wafted from the clearing behind them, a half-collapsed campfire, long cold. "You following me?" Cole asked, not sure whether to be amused or alarmed. "Following trouble," Caleb replied. "Seems it walks wherever you go." Cole frowned. "I'm not looking for any." "Doesn't mean it ain't looking for you." They moved to a flat rock near the trail's edge, overlooking a jagged slope that cut west toward the canyon. There, scattered hoof prints told of others passing, fresh ones. "I've been tracking a gang," Caleb said, voice tightening. "They call themselves the Hollow Sons. Left 3 bodies behind in Oak Bluffs. One of them a boy no older than 16. Cole's jaw flexed. "You think they're here?" Caleb nodded toward the cliffs. "They're watching the same things we are. Only difference is they don't fear curses. They feed off 'em." A rustle in the brush caught both their ears. Cole turned just in time to see a fleeting silhouette, a braid glinting silver under the moonlight, a familiar posture disappearing behind a ridge. "Nayeli." "She always vanish like smoke?" Caleb asked. Cole didn't answer. The preacher pulled a flask from his coat, unscrewed the cap, and offered it. "Warm apple cider." Nothing unholy, Cole declined with a half-smile, gaze still on the ridge. "Son," Caleb said softly, "don't trust every story they whisper around fires. Fear's a tool just like any knife. Held right, it cuts others. Held wrong, it cuts you." Before Cole could reply, a sharp thwick sliced the air. Something zipped past his cheek. Caleb staggered back with a grunt, hand clutching his upper arm. A black feathered arrow jutted from his sleeve, blood already soaking through. Cole spun, gun drawn. "Stay low," he barked. From the cliffs came a cackle, long, wild, guttural. Not the laughter of a man. Not sane. Then silence. Just the preacher's heavy breaths and the rustle of leaves trembling in unseen wind. Caleb pressed a cloth to his wound, wincing. "Arrow missed the bone," he muttered. But that laugh, it wasn't Apache. No, Cole said, jaw clenched. It wasn't. He helped the older man to sit, eyes scanning the ridge. In the dark, Caleb's voice rose faintly, whispering into the black. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he began, the familiar psalm broken by pain. And as his prayer echoed through the trees, the canyon answered back with another low, feral laugh. The wind tungled through the narrow canyon like a whispered warning. Shadows danced erratically against the walls, cast by the flickering light of a single oil lamp perched on a rock. Its flame sputtered in the breeze, barely holding on. Cole slowed his steps as he rounded the bend and spotted the hunched figure by the fire. Jed Sawyer. The man was crouched low, poking at the embers, his back to Cole. The scent of burnt wood still lingered, mingled with something sharper. Sweat, maybe, or fear. Jed looked up, startled, then broke into a wide, toothy grin. "Cole!" he called, spreading his arms like they were old friends. Hell, am I glad to see a familiar face. Cole didn't smile. Jed stood and dusted off his trousers, limping a little as he approached. "Thought you were lost for good. Folks say this valley swallows men whole." Cole didn't respond, just narrowed his eyes, watching Jed closely. "Place gives me the damn chills," Jed muttered. "But you know, all that spooky nonsense aside, there's gold here. I swear it." He gestured toward the far side of the ravine where shadows yawned like open mouths. "I've been hearing things, seeing signs. You remember what Ruth said back at the saloon?" Jed's voice dropped. "Men disappear, yeah. But what if they disappear after they find it?" His eyes gleamed in the firelight, sharp, hungry. Cole crossed his arms, still silent. Jed's smile faltered for a split second. He cleared his throat and sat back down beside the fire. "I say we team up. Just like old times," he said, tossing a twig into the flame. "Split whatever we find, fair and square." Cole moved closer, gaze drifting past the man to a strange pattern in the dirt behind him. Small, deliberate marks, like a boot heel dragged and twisted. Signals. He followed the trail with his eyes. It led to a rock outcrop, half hidden by brush. And beneath it, barely visible in the shadows, was that a tin can with a cloth tied around it? Cole stiffened. Jed followed his gaze, then quickly turned away, forcing a chuckle. "This place makes you see ghosts, huh?" Cole stepped forward. "You leave a sign for someone, Jed?" Jed's eyes snapped up, grin gone. "What are you talking about?" "You dragged your heel in the dirt 3 times, then once. Signal for a meeting?" Jed stood up slow, hands at his sides. "Now hold on. Don't get all jumpy." "You think I wouldn't notice?" Cole said, voice low. "You always were sloppy." Jed's jaw worked, eyes darting. Then he did something Cole would never forget. He reached behind his coat and pulled a revolver. Fast, but not fast enough. Cole dove behind the fire pit as the shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the rock. Sparks flew, the lamp tipped and shattered, plunging the clearing into near darkness. Cole hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up with his own gun drawn. But Jed didn't fire again. He just stood there, arm trembling, breath short, eyes wild. In that flickering moment, something changed. Jed's bravado cracked. He was shaking. "Wasn't supposed to be like this," he whispered. "They said you'd be gone by now." "Who?" Cole growled. Jed didn't answer. Then, from the darkness behind the ridge, came a sound. Clink, clink, clink. Metal tools hitting stone. Not close, but not far either. Cole turned toward the noise, heart pounding. A mine. Someone was already digging. Someone who'd been waiting for Jed's signal. Cole swung his gaze back, but Jed was gone. The coward had bolted into the shadows, leaving only the echo of footsteps and the trembling firelight behind. A low wail rolled across the canyon walls like a mourning spirit, rising with the wind until it echoed through the stones. Cole froze on the narrow trail, his hand instinctively brushing the butt of his revolver. In the dim glow of firelight flickering from somewhere beyond the ridge, a pale figure drifted into view, white robes billowing, face obscured beneath a hood, gliding like it was weightless. Another howl rose, this time from the left, then a third from behind. They were surrounded. Cole's breath steamed in the cold air. This wasn't the first time he'd heard that sound. He remembered it the night he fell into the valley, the same unholy shriek that chilled him to the marrow. But now, something was different. From his vantage, he squinted through the brush, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. And there it was. Just beneath the robe's hem, a boot. Scuffed, leather-worn, dust-streaked. No ghost he ever heard of wore a pair of handmade riding boots. Cole crouched low, inching forward. Below, in the hollow between cliffs, half a dozen figures moved through the trees. All wore white cloaks, their hands busy hauling crates and tools. The strange cries weren't from spirits. They came from crude horns, long tubes carved from bone or pipe, held beneath their robes. A trick. Smoke, sound, shadows. They'd built a haunting myth to keep people away. And the fools in Dustwood had swallowed it whole. Cole's stomach twisted with anger, not just at the deception, but at the fear they'd stoked, the way they'd turned legend into a weapon. Then he saw her, Nayeli, bound at the wrists, pushed forward by a man in a fringed coat. Her face was bruised, but her chin stayed high, eyes burning with silent rage. The man beside her turned, Silas Kane. His long black duster swayed with each step, silver spurs glinting in the firelight. His face was lean, hawk-like, lips curled in a perpetual smirk. And next to him, Jed. Cole's jaw tightened. The bastard had gone full turncoat. Jed laughed at something Silas said, then took a swig from a flask. The two men clapped shoulders like old friends. Cole's blood boiled. He crept closer, staying low behind a fallen log. 30 yards, maybe less. He had one shot before they noticed. But he didn't aim to kill. He stood suddenly, stepping out from the shadows. "Let her go," he growled. The entire camp froze. Silas turned slowly, then smiled like a snake. Well, well, Cole Brennan, walking right into the devil's fire. Nayeli turned her head sharply, eyes widening at the sight of him. Jed raised his rifle. "Don't be stupid, Cole." Cole fired first, not at a man, but the rope holding Nayeli. The bullet snapped it clean. She dropped low, rolling away from her captor. Chaos erupted. The phony ghosts scrambled, robes flying, horns tumbling. Someone yelled, "He's here!" Another fired wildly into the trees. Cole ducked, firing again to keep heads down, and reached Nayeli. She stumbled but grabbed his arm, eyes wide with adrenaline. "This way," he whispered, pulling her behind a boulder. Silas didn't chase. He just stood there, watching them flee, unbothered. Then, as Cole and Nayeli disappeared into the brush, his laughter echoed off the stone, deep, mocking, endless. "You'll join us soon, Brennan," he shouted. "We all belong to the dark here." Cole didn't look back, but he knew in his gut Silas wasn't just bluffing. Out of the swirling dust, a shadow charged forward with startling speed. A loud crack rang out as the stranger's fist slammed into the jaw of the bandit aiming at Cole. The man dropped like a sack of grain. Cole spun around, hand at his hip, but the stranger raised both hands. "Easy, cowboy," he rasped. "I'm on your side." Even in the flickering torchlight, the man's scar was impossible to miss. A jagged line running from his left brow to the edge of his cheek. His hat was worn, clothes dusty and patched, but his eyes burned sharp with awareness. Cole didn't lower his guard. "Who the hell are you?" The man gave a half smile. "Name's Elias Monroe." The name struck a chord. Stories of a cowboy who'd vanished years ago, swallowed by the valley. A ghost tale, folks said. A man lost to the curse. Nayeli narrowed her eyes. "You're supposed to be dead." Elias shrugged. "Would have been, if I hadn't found the wind shaft." "The what?" Cole asked, still catching his breath. Elias motioned for them to follow. "No time to explain here. This way, before they find us." They ducked under a rocky overhang, following Elias through a narrow crevice that funneled down into the bowels of the cliff. The smell hit them first. Sulfur, sharp and choking, burning the nostrils. "Smells like hell," Cole muttered, covering his mouth with a sleeve. "Closest thing to it," Elias replied. "Silas keeps his secrets here, things he don't want daylight touching." They moved deeper. The air grew thick, the walls sweating with mineral damp. Cole could hear the faint drip of water echoing somewhere ahead, alongside the low moan of air rushing through hidden tunnels. Wind shafts, Elias called them. Old mining passages, long abandoned. "I was caught trying to warn a family that wandered too close," Elias explained, his voice low but steady. "Silas and his boys locked me in one of the side shafts. Left me to rot." "How'd you get out?" Nayeli asked. Elias tapped the wall beside him. "These shafts breathe. Air in, air out. I followed the flow, crawling half blind through rock and soot, found the old vent tunnels they used to move supplies. Took me weeks. I came out covered in ash and mad with thirst, but alive." "And you stayed here?" Cole asked. "I couldn't leave." Elias's face darkened. "Not after what I saw. Silas ain't just chasing gold. He's sitting on a stockpile of powder, ready to burn the whole damn valley if he needs to." They reached a bend in the tunnel. Elias held up a hand. "Quiet now." He eased around the corner, and there they were, crates, stacks of them, wooden barrels sealed with wax, stamped with faded military emblems, some marked black powder, others highly volatile. Cole's stomach turned. "Jesus." Nayeli stepped forward, the torchlight catching her face. "This is enough to level a town." Elias nodded grimly. "That's the plan." Footsteps echoed above them, distant but closing. "We have to move," Elias whispered. "They don't know we've found this yet. But if they do—" A soft creak behind them. They turned, and Cole's eyes widened. Someone had followed them. The flickering torchlight danced across jagged walls, slick with moisture. but it was the glint of gold that caught the eye, and the shadow that chilled the spine. Silas Kane stood in the heart of the cavern, arms spread like a prophet before an altar, surrounded by veins of raw gold shimmering under the low amber light. His face, half lit by the flames, bore the smug grin of a man who had fooled the world. "Well, look what the winds dragged in," he said, voice smooth as snake oil. "The cowboy, the girl, and the ghost come back from the grave." Elias froze. The scars on his face seemed to deepen under the weight of memory. Cole felt Nayeli shift beside him, one hand inching toward the knife hidden in her sash. Silas stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. Behind him, his men lined the cavern wall, eyes hollow, guns drawn but idle, as if waiting for a command only he could give. "You were always a stubborn bastard, Elias," Silas sneered. "Should have died in that shaft. Would have saved us all the trouble." Cole kept his gun low but ready, his gaze fixed on every movement. "So this is it," he said, "the heart of the curse." Silas let out a laugh that bounced off the cavern walls like a crow's cry. "Curse? You people really are thick. There's no curse, no spirits, just stories. Smoke and mirrors for the gullible. Fear, cowboy. Fear is the best fence ever built." He tapped the cavern wall with the barrel of his revolver. "These walls are laced with gold. But gold brings eyes, and eyes bring questions. So I made sure no one ever came back out. Apache ghosts, missing men, blood sacrifices, whatever kept him away." Elias stepped forward, jaw clenched. "You used their culture. You twisted their fears." Silas shrugged. "They feared it already. I just gave them a shape. Folks will believe anything if you wrap it in superstition." Cole's voice turned cold. "And what about the men you buried in those caves? The ones who didn't buy the story?" "They made their choice," Silas said with a smirk, "like Elias here. Except he crawled out of his grave. That I didn't plan for." He turned to Elias. "But I can fix that." A sudden silence fell. Silas raised his revolver. "Wait!" Nayeli shouted, stepping forward. "He's not your threat." "We are." Silas didn't flinch. "That may be true, sweetheart, but he's a loose end." He cocked the hammer. Elias didn't move. He stood firm, eyes locked on Silas, lips moving silently. Maybe a prayer, maybe defiance. Cole's gun came up in a flash. "No!" he said, voice like steel drawn from the fire. Silas froze, staring at the barrel pointed straight between his eyes. "You really want to die for this mess, cowboy?" he asked, lips curling. "You already buried your soul," Cole replied. "Don't make me bury your body." Around them, tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. The gold shimmered behind Silas, a cruel mockery of all the blood spilled to protect it. From the shadows, one of Silas's men shifted uneasily. "You think fear is power," Cole said, stepping forward. "But fear only controls the weak. And I ain't weak." Silas's smirk faded, just a flicker. Then, a shout from the rear, a sound of scuffling, more footsteps. Reinforcements? Or chaos? Cole's eyes never left Silas, but his finger tightened on the trigger. Gunfire shattered the tension like a thunderclap, sending a swarm of bats shrieking into the gloom. The cavern erupted, smoke, shouts, and confusion tumbling over each other in a chaotic wave. Cole fired again, the muzzle flash illuminating Silas's stunned face for a split second. "Move!" he barked, grabbing Elias by the arm. Nayeli was already ahead, torch in hand, weaving through the narrow shaft toward the wind tunnel. The air turned colder with every step, laced with damp and the acrid tang of gunpowder. Behind them, the gang had recovered. Footsteps pounded the stone, shouts of, "Get them!" echoing off the walls. "This way!" Nayeli called, disappearing into the mist. Cole dragged Elias behind him, the older man stumbling but not resisting. "Keep moving!" Cole yelled, coughing as smoke and morning fog swirled together in a suffocating cloud. The cavern began to shift, no longer warm with gold and torchlight, but cold, slick, and alive with threat. They burst into the outer tunnel, the old windshaft Elias had once crawled through. Fog clung to the rock like cobwebs, thick and ghostly. Each breath was heavy, laced with damp and burnt sulfur. "I can't see a damn thing," Elias rasped. "Follow her voice," Cole muttered, ears straining for Nayeli's footsteps ahead. The tunnel narrowed, twisting and sloping downward. From behind came more shots, wild, ricocheting off the stone. A bullet grazed the rock near Cole's shoulder, sending a spray of dust into his eyes. "Keep going," he growled, blinking hard. Suddenly Nayeli halted. Cole nearly slammed into her. "What is it?" he asked. She pointed ahead. A massive slab of rock had shifted, now leaning precariously across the passage, half fallen from the ceiling, dust still trickling from the crack above. "We can squeeze under," she whispered. "No, wait," Elias began. Too late. Another gunshot rang out. The sound vibrated through the shaft, and the ground trembled. With a grinding groan, the boulder collapsed fully, slamming into the floor and sealing the tunnel behind them. Dust and silence. They froze, breathing hard. The gunfire had stopped. "They're trapped behind it," Nayeli said, voice hoarse. "Or we are," Elias muttered. Cole didn't answer. His ears were still ringing. He turned his head, peering into the swirling fog ahead. The morning had broken outside, but the light barely touched the shaft. Only gray mist greeted them, dense and heavy as a winter shroud. Then a shape moved, just ahead, just enough to catch. A silhouette in the mist, broad shoulders, long coat, and the unmistakable glint of a blade, catching the weak morning light. Silas. He wasn't behind the rock. He had found another way. Cole raised his pistol, hand steady. The fog curled between them, muting everything but the pulse in his ears. Nayeli drew her knife, lips pressed tight. Elias reached for a loose rock with shaking fingers. The mist thickened again, swallowing the shape. But Cole knew. He hadn't imagined it. Silas Kane was still hunting them. The noon sun bore down like a hammer, searing every inch of the dry mountain pass. Shadows shrank beneath the jagged rocks, and the air rippled with heat. At the edge of a narrow clearing, a small fire crackled, half-hearted in the blistering light. Jed Sawyer sat beside it, sweat glistening on his brow, shirt clinging to his back. His hands shook, not from the heat, but from something deeper, something clawing at his insides. Cole approached slowly, boots crunching against the gravel. Nayeli and Elias followed behind, wary, silent. "You look like hell," Cole muttered. Jed stood abruptly, pistol already in hand, aimed straight at Cole's chest. "Don't come any closer," he barked. Cole didn't flinch. His voice was calm, eyes narrowed. "You really gonna do this?" Jed's grip tightened on the handle. "Put down the satchel." Cole glanced down, the leather bag slung across his shoulder. Inside, the few gold nuggets they'd recovered from the collapsed cavern. "It's not worth dying for, Jed," Nayeli said softly, stepping beside Cole. Jed laughed, sharp and dry. "Easy for you to say. You ain't got a father who died coughing up dust, begging for bread. You didn't grow up counting coins to buy boots with holes." Elias growled under his breath. "You selfish son of a—" "Shut up," Jed snapped, swinging the gun toward Elias. His face twisted, part rage, part desperation. "I ain't going back to Dustwood empty-handed. I'm not dying in a shack with nothing but regret." His voice cracked. "I don't want to die poor. I don't want to die poor." The words spilled out like a broken record, trembling, fragile. "You're not poor," Cole said, stepping forward, slow and steady. "You've got your soul. That's more than Silas ever had." Jed's eyes flicked, uncertain, just for a moment. Then Elias lunged. It was fast, too fast. The old cowboy's shoulder slammed into Jed's ribs, knocking the pistol upward. The shot rang out, sharp and sudden. A flock of birds burst from the rocks above. Elias staggered back. Blood blossomed on his shirt. "No!" Nayeli screamed, running to his side. Jed stood frozen, gun dangling in his hand, lips quivering. "I didn't mean— he shouldn't have—" Cole moved, one step, two. Then he was on him. He tackled Jed to the ground, dust flying as they rolled. Jed tried to fire again, but Cole knocked the pistol aside. His fist came down hard. Once, twice. Jed yelped, shielding his face. "You turned on your own," Cole hissed, voice like gravel. "You let greed eat your damn heart." Jed coughed, spitting blood. "You don't get it. I was scared. I still am. I don't want to die in poverty, like my old man." Cole stared down at him, chest heaving. From behind, Nayeli's voice, tight with fear. "Elias is bleeding bad." Cole looked back. Elias lay slumped, eyes barely open, blood soaking through his shirt. His breathing was ragged. Cole stood slowly, turning away from Jed. The knife from his boot was in his hand now, blade catching the sun, sharp and ready. "You made your choice," he said without looking back. "Now I'll make mine." The night had turned colder, the wind whispering through the jagged ridges like a mourner's breath. Moonlight spilled across the hard, cracked earth, casting everything in silver and shadow. Elias lay still on the ground, near the edge of the canyon, his breath coming in ragged bursts. Blood seeped from the wound in his side, dark and thick, soaking into the dust. His shirt clung to him, the stain spreading like an ink blot across a dying page. Cole knelt beside him, pressing a torn strip of cloth to the wound. But it was no use. The bleeding wouldn't stop. Nayeli hovered nearby, her hands trembling as she offered water Elias couldn't drink. Elias's eyes fluttered open. "Save your strength," Cole muttered. The old cowboy gave a dry chuckle that turned into a cough. "Don't got much left to save." He turned his gaze up to the stars, then back to Cole. "There's something you need to know before I go." "I'm listening," Cole said, jaw tight. Elias winced as he shifted. "Silas, he didn't just find the gold. He forced men, dozens of us, down into those shafts. Worked us like animals. No daylight, just dust and death." Nayeli's eyes darkened. "That's why the others never returned." Elias nodded slowly. "They didn't vanish. They died down there, caved in, choked, buried in the dark. And the ones who tried to leave," he swallowed hard, "Silas made examples of them." His hand trembled as he reached inside his coat. Here." He held out a battered brass lighter, old and scorched, its engraving nearly faded. Cole took it gently. "What is this?" "Not just a lighter," Elias rasped. "That's the trigger. There's dynamite lined along the deepest vein. Silas don't know I rigged it years ago, never had the chance to use it." "Why not?" Elias smiled weakly. "I was waiting for someone who wouldn't flinch." His eyelids drooped, his breath grew shallower. "One more favor," he whispered. Cole leaned closer. "Bury me proper, cowboy way. No pine box, just a blanket and a hat." "You got it," Cole said quietly. Elias looked at Nayeli, then back to the stars. "Funny. I always thought I'd die alone." "You didn't," she said softly. A long silence fell. Then, slowly, Elias's chest stopped rising. His eyes stared upward, not in pain, but in peace. Cole reached over, gently closing them with 2 fingers. No words, just wind. He pulled a blanket from his pack and wrapped Elias's body with care, laid him flat, set the man's old worn hat over his chest as requested. The fire had died down, casting long shadows across the canyon walls. Cole lowered his head and whispered a short, quiet prayer, just a few words, the kind a cowboy might say when no one else was left to do the talking. Then, clip-clop. The sound came faintly at first. Hooves. A single rider, approaching at a slow, deliberate pace. Cole stood, eyes narrowing. Nayeli reached for her knife, shoulders tensed. They both turned toward the sound. Out of the fog just beyond the bend in the pass came the unmistakable silhouette of a rider on horseback. Silas Kane. Dust exploded into the air as hooves thundered down the narrow canyon. Shouts echoed off the rock walls, wild, angry, bloodthirsty. The sound of gunfire ripped through the valley like a lightning storm. Cole crouched behind a slab of stone, bullets ricocheting just inches from his head. Nayeli pressed her back to the rock beside him, reloading her revolver with quick, practiced hands. Her eyes burned with fierce resolve. "They're pushing us in!" she shouted. "I know," Cole grunted, eyes scanning the crags above. "That's what I want." From the high ledge, the bellowing voice of Silas Kane rang out, commanding his men like a conductor of chaos. "No survivors! Bring me Brennan's head." The gang closed in, snarling like wolves. One leapt from his horse, lunging toward Nayeli with a blade. She twisted, ducked, and slammed the butt of her pistol into his jaw. He crumpled without a sound. More were coming. Cole raised his Colt and fired twice. Clean, sharp shots. 2 bandits fell. "We need to buy time," Nayeli said, reaching into her pouch and pulling out a carved wooden whistle. "You sure that'll work?" Cole asked. "Only one way to find out." She blew hard. The sharp, eerie trill echoed through the gorge, high and shrill, ancient. The sound pierced the chaos like a cry from the bones of the land itself. Then, silence. Only the wind and the heavy breathing of horses. For a heartbeat, even Silas hesitated. Then, crack! From above, a thunderous rumble. Boulders shifted, rocks groaned. The Apache traps had been set long ago, built into the cliffs. With a deafening roar, a landslide came crashing down across the narrowest part of the canyon. Dust and rubble swallowed half the gang. Horses screamed. Men shouted in confusion, scrambling back. It wasn't enough to finish them, but it was enough to divide them. Cole grabbed Nayeli's hand. "Now, this way." They darted through the smoke and dust, weaving between the boulders toward the deeper recesses of the canyon, toward the old mine, the heart of it all. Behind them, Silas barked orders. "Find them!" They're headed for the powder shaft. Inside the cave, the air grew tight. The deeper they went, the more suffocating the heat and smoke became. The walls glistened with damp and soot. The thundering steps behind them closed in. Suddenly, Nayeli tripped. A hand grabbed her. Silas. He yanked her up by the collar, dragging her back. "Gotcha now, girl," he sneered. "Time to end this." Before he could pull the trigger, a voice growled from the shadows. "Let her go." Cole emerged, gun raised. But he wasn't aiming to shoot Silas, not directly. His other hand flicked open Elias's old lighter. A flame danced in the dusty dark. Silas's eyes widened. "You wouldn't." Cole's expression was stone. "This whole place, lined with powder. One spark and we all go." Silas hesitated, grip on Nayeli tightening. "You think I'm bluffing?" Cole said, stepping closer, flame steady. The lighter flared as the wind curled around them, dust and ash swirled. The faint, unmistakable scent of sulfur filled the air. Silas looked between Cole and the girl. His lips curled. "You're insane." Cole didn't blink. "Maybe. But I'm not afraid to burn it all down." The wind howled through the shaft. Somewhere far above, the whistling of distant support forces answered the call. From the shadows, dust began to fall. The ceiling groaned, and in Cole's hand, the flame held steady. The flame leapt from Cole's lighter and caught the frayed edge of an old powder-soaked fuse. It sizzled, snaked along the cavern floor, lighting the way toward destruction. Then, boom! The explosion ripped through the tunnel with a roar that cracked the sky. The ground shook like thunder rolling beneath their feet. Flame blossomed through the darkness, turning shadows into monsters and heat into a living thing. Dust and debris shot outward, a storm of stone and fire. The walls of the mine screamed as they split apart, ancient beams giving way with deep groans. Cole was thrown back, slammed against a wall. The world went white. He blinked, ears ringing, vision swimming. Nayeli's voice pierced the chaos, shouting his name. From the firestorm, Silas emerged like a demon born of flame. Face blackened with soot, eyes bloodshot, mouth twisted in fury. "You ruined everything!" he screamed, lunging at Cole. The two men crashed to the ground, fists flying, wrestling amidst falling embers and searing heat. Every breath burned. Every strike felt like it might be the last. Silas grunted, driving a knee into Cole's side, reaching for the knife on his belt. Cole twisted, elbowed him hard, wresting the blade away. The struggle tipped them dangerously close to a fissure cracked open by the blast. Above them, boulders dislodged, raining down. Nayeli darted forward, coughing through the smoke. "Cole!" Cole saw her silhouette through the haze, reaching toward him. "Go!" he shouted. "Get out! I'm not leaving you!" Silas roared, dragging Cole by the collar. "If I die, you're coming with me!" Cole grabbed a chunk of rock and slammed it into Silas's arm. The bandit howled, loosening his grip. The mountain groaned again. Another explosion, deeper inside, tore through the foundation, shattering supports. The roof buckled. Nayeli dove forward, catching Cole's arm just as the floor beneath Silas gave way. With one last scream, Silas disappeared into the smoke and fire, swallowed by the mountain he tried to claim. Cole and Nayeli scrambled out of the path of falling stone, coughing, eyes burning. The walls behind them crumbled inward, devouring the treasure, the evil, and the lies buried beneath. A final, deafening blast shook the valley. Flames shot from the mine entrance, as if hell itself had been unleashed. The cliffsides split, rock collapsing in a thunderous cascade. A storm of fire, dust, and ash surged outward. Cole threw himself over Nayeli, shielding her as the world around them shattered. Then, silence. Ash fell like snow. The ground still rumbled faintly, like the earth was catching its breath after a scream. Cole slowly rolled over, blood at his temple, but breathing. Nayeli blinked up at him, dazed but alive. The mine, the cursed heart of the valley, was gone. Smoke lingered like a low-hanging ghost over the valley floor. The once raging fire had burned itself to sleep, leaving behind charred stone, scorched earth, and the silence of survival. Cole coughed, his chest tight, lungs raw from smoke and dust. His eyes blinked open to a sky painted not with the crimson of dusk, but the soft gold of dawn. A new beginning where there once had been ruin. Beside him, Nayeli stirred, her dark hair tangled with ash and her cheek streaked with soot. She winced, sat up slowly, and met his gaze. In that moment, nothing had to be said. They were alive. The world hadn't ended. Not quite. Over the ridge, the sound of hooves and soft voices echoed. Figures emerged from the smoke. Amos Redbird at the front, flanked by Apache riders on painted horses. Behind them, Reverend Caleb walked with a slight limp, his weather-worn Bible clutched to his chest, hat gone, eyes misty. Amos dismounted first. His face, lined with age and wisdom, softened as he took in the sight of the two survivors. "The mountain has spoken," he said solemnly. "The curse is broken." Cole let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Caleb knelt beside them, offering each a steadying hand. "There's something divine in surviving fire," he murmured. "Perhaps truth burns brighter than fear." Further up, more Apache arrived, leading mules with blankets and supplies. Someone brought a battered kettle to boil over a fresh fire. Another handed out bowls filled with hot cornmeal porridge, thick, smoky, and comforting. Someone passed a battered tin of dark coffee, strong, bitter, poured slowly from a metal fin. Steam curled upward into the cool dawn air as the survivors gathered to share the first meal of a new day. Cole sat with Nayeli beneath the fractured stone arch that once loomed over the cursed path. The heat of the coffee warmed his fingers. The porridge reminded him of dusty mornings back in cattle country, before the scars, before the betrayals. Nayeli watched him quietly. The sunlight caught the curve of her cheek, the strength in her stillness. She had seen the same horrors, walked through the same smoke, and still sat tall with her shoulders square, her eyes steady. "I never thought I'd see peace in this valley," she said softly. He nodded. It was never the valley, really. Just the men who used its shadows. Amos joined them for a moment, placing a hand on Cole's shoulder. "Whatever brought you here, it's done now. Dustwood may not be perfect, but it remembers those who do right. Cole looked down at the bowl in his hand, then up at the broken cliffs. The gold, the lies, the pain, all buried now, maybe forever. As the warmth of food settled in and the sharpness of adrenaline faded, he finally allowed his body to rest. The ache in his limbs was proof of survival. The presence of others, proof of belonging. Nayeli leaned close, her voice no louder than a breath. "Now that it's over, where will you go?" Her eyes met his, searching, open, not pleading, just wondering. Cole didn't answer right away. The fire crackled softly. The scent of roasted corn and strong coffee hung in the air. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the sun climbed higher. The morning sun cast a golden hue across the high ridge, spilling light over the vast plains below. Cole sat astride his horse, the breeze tugging gently at his coat, eyes fixed on the winding red dirt trail that led back toward Dustwood. The road shimmered faintly under the heat, a ribbon of memory and promise stretching far into the horizon. Behind him, the valley lay still, silent now, no longer whispering curses or harboring ghosts, just a quiet basin of scorched stone and ashes, cleansed by fire and courage. The Apache stood nearby in respectful silence. Amos Redbird approached, his walking stick tapping lightly against the rocks. He offered Cole a small leather pouch, tobacco, and a handful of sage. "For the road ahead," Amos said, "and for the ones you've left behind." Cole nodded, taking it with a calloused hand. "Thank you for trusting me." Amos smiled, eyes narrowing with the weight of years. "The land remembers those who stand for truth, even when it costs them." Caleb came next, his shirt still stained with soot, face lined but serene. He clutched his Bible loosely, more a companion now than a shield. "You rode into a storm, son," the Reverend said, "and came out clearer." Cole chuckled, though it carried a weariness beneath. "Didn't feel that clear while I was running for my life." Caleb grinned. "Sometimes clarity comes after the running." The small group began to disband, heading back toward their rebuilt camp. Only one stayed behind, Nayeli. She stood a few paces from his horse, arms crossed loosely, wind pulling strands of her dark hair across her face. She didn't smile, not fully, but there was warmth in her eyes. A silent understanding passed without words. "I guess this is where the trail splits," she said softly. Cole looked down, then back up at her, the sun catching in his pale eyes. "You'll be all right?" She nodded. "This is my home. Has been long before the gold. Will be long after." He shifted in the saddle, reluctant. "You ever come riding out that way? I'll know where to find you," she finished for him. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of wild sage and scorched earth. Then gently, Cole leaned down, and she placed a hand on his. No promises, just a moment held between them. He turned his horse slowly. With a nudge of his heel, the animal began to trot, hooves kicking up a lazy trail of red dust. He didn't look back. Back in Dustwood, Ruth Holloway would be wiping counters at the saloon, slamming mugs of coffee down for gossipers, dismissing whispers of curses and gold with a dry laugh and a sharper tongue. She would say Cole Brennan had gone where cowboys always go, where the road stretches too far to see and the past rides close behind. At the ridge's edge, Cole paused one last time. He glanced over his shoulder, not toward the valley, but toward the people who had stood beside him, toward the buried past and the freedom earned. Elias Monroe's words echoed faintly in his mind. "Take freedom back with you." Cole touched the old lighter still tucked into his coat, now empty of flame but heavy with memory. Then he urged his horse forward. The red dust swirled behind him, curling into the air like smoke from a campfire long gone. His silhouette faded into the heat shimmer, smaller with every step, until nothing remained but the distant sound of hoofbeats. And still, somewhere in that silence, one truth lingered. The real curse lives not in valleys or shadows, but in the hunger of men's hearts. Where goodness walks, freedom still breathes. In the end, it wasn't gold or revenge that defined Cole's journey, but the choice to rise above fear and face the unknown with courage. The so-called curse was never in the valley. It lived in men's hearts, in greed, in betrayal, in silence. Elias died for the truth, and Cole rode on carrying it, not just for himself, but for those too afraid to break the chains of old lies. Sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do is walk away, free. The only real curse is the one we let control us. What do you think? Is fear more dangerous than fate? Is it possible that the stories we grow up fearing are just someone else's way to keep us small? If this story made you think, drop a 1 in the comments. Which state are you watching from? I'd love to know. And if these Wild West stories speak to your soul, don't forget to subscribe to True Wild West Stories for more tales that live deep in the dust and blood of the frontier.